Wiring part 2. On the front here, I have this northern radiator pulse width modulator that controls the fans. Basically, this module right here is supposed to go on the shroud itself with a sensor. When I'm looking at it, it's actually grounded. So this needs to be grounded basically to the radiator, I believe for the temperature switch. So that's my little ground strap here to the cross brace support. And then I'm waiting on a couple of smaller nutsert tools to put nutserts in there. So that's where that is ultimately going. Other items. Got the console temporarily mounted up. The whole point of that is to find the center of the dash. So I've got the holes drilled and marked for the Restomod air controls. That old cigarette lighter is going to be my e-stop, and then that hole here is the same one for the windshield wiper controls, which is a adjustable unit. Back in there, it's a multi-step instead of just on and off like the original ones. This whole mess, there is a huge amount of wiring in here, and I also wanted to see where it fit when I mocked it all up. I also have to do a small fuse box, which is this at the moment, in there somewhere. And then I also have to make sure that I've got room deep enough for cup holders and all the additional wiring connections. Other items, my channel here is pretty clean. I ran a ton of lines up there. This is just zip tied out of the way at the moment, as well as my back channel here. I've got it notched out so it'll be flat with the carpeting and the padding that I'm planning on putting. That is the controls that goes straight back to the battery for the ECU for the engine. Obviously the other lines there are the power windows. Got the dome light, LED dome light wired in. I've got lines up to the front for the front. The footwells are going to have LED lights. Back here, I've got some of this cleaned up, plugged in. Some of it's still a mess. It still needs to be cleaned up. Not totally done, but it's getting close. I also have wired up a little switch control here. This is a little $40 timers.shop or something like that online that I found. Plugged it in and it actually all works correctly, which is pretty nice. Basically what this is, it controls the dome lights so that it's soft on, soft off. And then when you close the door, it'll stay on momentarily for about 20 seconds. Think of it like courtesy lights on a modern car. So that's all wired in. A little bit of a pain to figure the wiring out, but some notes and I got it all set up. This is all set. I've got my wire up here, so I've got my license plate light. And the shop is a mess at the moment, obviously. I'm working on the Restomod items. Just getting there. It's all pretty straightforward plug-in at this point. I bought a couple extra knobs. I'm going to try to replace some of the knobs so they all match. And yeah, that's it at the moment. Working on installing the Restomod Air computer control module and all the wiring. Unfortunately, just about all the wires are too short. So I guess it was designed for the control unit to be within about 18 inches of the main box. And I'm about 2.5 feet. So everything needs extensions on it to make it work. And then the control valve, I'm not really sure where they think you're gonna mount the thing, but the line is about 36 inches long. So obviously that's not gonna work and it's gotta go through the firewall. So cutting and making extensions on everything to make it all work. Even the power line, the main connection was too short, so everything needs to be extended. So one step forward, two steps back, just taking time. Making a few lines here. Doesn't look like much, but the AC system controls are all plugged in. The e-stop is plugged in, and the rain gear windshield wiper multi-step switch is all wired in. Still a lot more to go, but it's getting closer. We are getting really close now. All the interior is all plugged in, labeled, tied off. My channel here is nice and clean. I've got everything tied up underneath the dash. This entire sewer line mess, although it looks crazy, is going to get cleaned up a little bit, but everything is where it needs to be. Just kind of a rundown here. This is for the Holley ECU. This is the transmission computer. Other various things. We have everything that plugs into the console is on releases. This is for the rear heated seats. This line right here is for the power for the front seats on both sides. One's for the heat, connects back to a switch. The other one is for the controls, forward and backwards and up and down and all that stuff. Other items, we have the courtesy lights all plugged in and wired, as well as the side lights that are LEDs. Those are plugged in and on disconnect to the console. Other items, all the stereo equipment and stuff is run, loose lines and ready to go. You can see here my fuse box. I wasn't planning on having to use that many, but I've got a 12 line fuse, and I'm using currently 9 of the 12, plus another ground bus bar there. What else? Other lines to the console on quick disconnects are all of the remote switches for the windows. Other items include the cell phone chargers, the wireless charging pads, rear plugs for rear cell phone charging. Front, we've got all the headlights, everything's plugged in there. We've got inside the e-stop for the emergency brake. That's where the lighter is. There is the e-stop button. Worked out pretty well. And that's all wired up, as well as, let's see, the power door locks are in there, and they're tied to the parking lights as well. So the parking lights will flash when you unlock or lock the doors. Whole lots of things to figure out. Underneath here, you've got the Dakota Digital, and then somewhere in there is another couple of Dakota Digital boxes with all the CAN bus stuff. Speaking of CAN bus, there's a few lines here for various CAN bus connectors from the ECU to the dash. It also plugs in daisy chains here to the transmission. And then there's a spare line right there which you can plug into tune, so I'll need to make sure that's accessible. What else? I got lines running back here for the heated seats, right and left. Those are on switches, obviously, in the console. A few other things. These get cleaned up. They're just in there temporarily until I figure out the rear seat situation. Moving forward, most everything is underneath. Here, let me lift the car up and then show you. All right, this looks like a mess. It's actually pretty close. Everything's just getting loose connected at the moment. Up in here, if you can see, that's the main line off of from the dash, comes down. Back here on the other side of the panel in the engine bay, I've got a power positive distribution block and a ground block. and that all ties in down here. All of these various fused lines are all for the various fans that go directly to the battery with all relay triggers. That's what I'm working on at the moment. I've got my horn blasters, high-powered electric horn for a motorcycle. It's all loose wired up at the moment. My main fans, turns out my pulse width modulation will not work, mostly because the fan motors are brushless and it only works with brushed. So AC/DC wasn't happy, so that idea got scrapped. So I've got a sensor in the radiator and it slowly turns the fans on through its own internal technology because they're all SPAL, nice high-end units. You'd see my front and camera right here. What else? We've got the relay and the plugs over here. This one's for the power steering, or not power steering, sorry. That one's for the supercharger pump, which is back here, all tied up. And I've got my headlights still to put in. These are sitting over here. These are the Draper units, the LED halo rings that are, you could change colors and all that fun stuff, the programming. Yeah, so this actually looks like a mess, but once it gets all cleaned up and tied up, it should be ready for fluids and first start. Wiring is finally done after many months of bending over and hurt my back. Everything is done, tied up, relatively clean. I still have some connections here. I'm waiting on a clip to come in. Everything clears here. I built another splash panel on this side. The headlight now has a hole in it, and I didn't want water sitting in there and rusting it out. Everything's nice and clean. Underside of the chassis is all ready to go. My wires up here, zip tied and nice and clean. Rear camera. Basically, we just need fluid. Got all my first start fluid sitting over there. So that'll go in hopefully tomorrow, and with a little bit of luck, we'll be making some noise. All right, first start failures. All the electrical so far checks out, got fluids in it. I just got done shimming the starter. It was grinding pretty good. That was not my major issue though. My big issue is all my stainless lines for fuel. I flared them all at 37 degrees. All the AN fittings are 37 degrees, and all of my flares are not holding pressure. Even back here. So even a couple of the ones I've got up here. So at this point, no start for today. It's still dripping fuel. So I'm gonna pull I've already pulled the fuse, and I'm gonna see if I can get the starter set up and aligned right, and see if I can actually build some oil pressure. My radiator is not filling hardly at all because I think I just gotta run the pump in order to empty all the, push the water through the way that's set up. So getting there. Hoping to get first fire today, but that's not happening. All right, I think I know what happened here. Fuel system's all apart here. And if I take one of these, what I thought was a pretty good flare, turns out this is not perfectly smooth on the inside, and there's a couple little nibs. So I redid another spare piece here, and I actually had to run it through this rigid flaring tool twice. And I think that's actually probably a better fit. And if I look at the size difference, I think you can actually see here that this one I redid and I ran it through twice has more of a neck versus the other one. And I think that's actually what my problem was on all my flare fittings. Either way, it's all cut up, so I'm replacing it with soft line rather than hard line. So, oh well. Spare flex plate here. I'm trying to figure out my starter engagement. I'm not super happy with this. It's very loud. So I've got a new starter coming. I'm thinking maybe I've shimmed it a bunch of times. It's just not happy. I'm not sure what the deal is. So similar brand, different style starter. We'll see how that works. Put it back together and we'll give it another start attempt once all the fuel line and the starter is back together. Things I did not expect to see so soon. So these are the hard lines I have to replace. They're just barely dripping, but enough to cause a fire. All right, I figured out my electrical ignition issue. So on these old ignitions, when they go to crank, you lose accessory power. So I actually had a jumper on the back of it to make sure I didn't lose it, because I knew the ECU here was plugged into it while it was cranking. It turns out there's two lines that go back to the fuse box. One is for accessory and one is for key on. And I had the jumper to the key on, but my fuse panel here, power in, is from the accessory. So this whole box was losing power, and this is running the power for the poly ECU as well as a couple other things. So made some modifications, and that should solve my wiring issue. Basically, I swapped the leads so that my accessory is always getting power. If need be, I'll tie them together, but we'll see if that works first.